The bullet that hit one man tore through an entire city. At 17:42 p.m., a single bullet outside a federal facility turned one street corner into a national crisis. Within hours, that sound would ripple through police radios, command rooms, and social media feeds until an entire city was split between loyalty and fear. What began as a routine stop outside the Brighton Park ICE facility exploded into America's most politically charged standoff in decades, a night when federal agents, local police, and thousands of citizens all fought for control of the same square mile of ground. Some called it justice, others called it occupation. But one thing was certain: when the chain of command breaks, law and order don't disappear, they turn on each other. If you were there, watching the lights go out across Chicago, what side would you stand on? At 17:42 p.m., the hum of traffic outside the Brighton Park ICE facility broke into silence. A silver sedan, mid-sized, unremarkable, approached the checkpoint at nearly 68 miles per hour, too fast for a zone-marked federal perimeter. Two officers stepped forward, flashing lights, raising hands. The car didn't slow. Seconds later, radios cracked with static. One warning, one command. Then a sound that would echo across the entire city. A single gunshot. When the smoke cleared, the driver, Silverio Villegas Gonzalez, 33, a temporary resident with no criminal record, lay motionless behind the wheel. ICE immediately labeled it self-defense. Witnesses said the vehicle had already stopped. By 1746, the first video hit TikTok. By 1758, it had reached 1.2 million views. At 1804, national outlets picked up the headline, "Unarmed man shot outside federal facility in Chicago." Hashtags multiplied: number Brighton Park shooting, number no I seen our city, number justice for Silverio. Within an hour, those three phrases had been shared more than 5.8 million times across platforms. Inside the ICE command post, monitors glowed with red alerts. Dozens of officers replayed the footage again and again, each angle showing the same few seconds that no one could agree on. Was it a threat or a mistake? Outside, the crowd began to form. First 5 people, then 20, then hundreds. Cars slowed, phones lifted. The air thickened not with smoke, but with disbelief. By 1830, local dispatch logged 9 separate calls about civil unrest forming. By 1845, Chicago was no longer calm. And as the last sunlight faded over Brighton Park, one truth became undeniable. What started as a single bullet would soon ignite the most politically explosive night Chicago had seen in decades. By 19:10 p.m., the quiet streets around Brighton Park were no longer quiet. What began as a dozen onlookers had swelled into nearly 700 people, pressing against metal barricades, phones raised high, streaming in real time. The words, "They shot an unarmed man," echoed from every speaker, every feed, every caption. On TikTok alone, live views surpassed 3.4 million within 35 minutes. On X, the phrase number "No I See No Walls" trended #own nationwide. The temperature in the crowd wasn't measured in degrees, it was measured in rage. At 1932, federal officers formed a half circle outside the ICE gate, helmets on. Inside their earpieces, "Maintain perimeter, no lethal force, keep civilians back." But the civilians didn't move back, they surged. Plastic barriers clattered to the pavement, a rhythm of defiance against steel. At 19:46, a flare streaked into the air, not a weapon, just light. But that light turned the sky red, and with it, the city's pulse shifted. Hundreds chanted in unison, voices shaking the night. "Whose streets? Our streets!" Within 10 minutes, smoke drifted from trash bins set ablaze. A local reporter's feed showed 3 separate crowds converging from the south and west. CPD scanners logged 11 emergency calls for civil disturbance. By 20, the governor's office was notified. Situation escalating beyond local control. That single message set off a chain of reactions that would pull federal, state, and city authorities into open conflict within the hour. And if you'd been standing there surrounded by the chants, the lights, the uncertainty, would you have stayed? Or walked away before the night crossed the line between protest and crisis? Stay tuned, because what came next wasn't a crowd anymore. It was an operation. By 20:30 p.m., the protest at Brighton Park was no longer a local disturbance. It was trending across every major network in America. The White House Situation Room had gone live minutes earlier. Footage of crowds pushing against the ICE gate looped silently on 6 monitors. Then, at 20:37, the order came. Initiate Operation Midway Blitz. Secure all federal property in the Chicago sector. Within 9 minutes, 480 federal agents, 27 armored vehicles, and 2 UH-60 Black Hawk helicopters were mobilized from Joliet and Rockford bases. By 2055, the first column crossed I-55, escorted by Illinois State Police, unaware of what they were escorting. Every step of the convoy was live-streamed by journalists, commuters, even drone hobbyists tracking its movement from above. Viewers counted 34 vehicles entering the city in formation. On TikTok, the caption read simply, "Federal forces rolling into Chicago." In less than an hour, that clip had 8.1 million views. Meanwhile, inside Chicago Police HQ, confusion grew. No official communication had been received from DHS. Officers watching the same footage as the public began to realize that control of the city's southern sector was shifting not politically but physically. At 21:02, DHS confirmed the operation's scope: full jurisdiction over all federal, state, or municipal zones deemed at risk. The statement ignited immediate backlash from the mayor's office and the governor of Illinois. But by then, it no longer mattered. Convoys were already setting up temporary checkpoints near 47th Street and Pershing Road. Overhead, Black Hawks hovered in pairs, searchlights sweeping over rooftops as plumes of smoke drifted from the industrial district below. Inside one command truck, a monitor displayed the latest metric: projected containment radius, 3.1 miles. Estimated civilian presence, 1,240. Chicago wasn't just witnessing a protest anymore, it was entering federal lockdown. By 21:05 p.m., the command floor of Chicago Police Headquarters looked more like a newsroom than a control center. Dozens of screens glowed red, with live feeds from Brighton Park, Archer Avenue, and the Stevenson Expressway. Helicopters streaked above the skyline. Armored convoys from Operation Midway Blitz were visible from nearly every high-rise in the South Side. Inside the room, tension was thick enough to silence even the radios. Every officer knew the question hanging in the air: who's actually in charge? At 21:11, Chief of Patrol Marcus Ellison received a brief encrypted message from the mayor's liaison. 6 words that would change the course of the night. All units, code 999. Stand down. No engagement, no confrontation, no coordination with federal agents. Within 7 minutes, 47 separate transmissions carrying the same phrase echoed across CPD frequencies. Patrol cars en route to Brighton Park turned away. Others shut off their lights and parked under overpasses, waiting for further orders that never came. By 21:20, live traffic maps showed blue icons, city patrols disappearing one by one from the district. A federal monitor in Washington logged the change in real time. Local presence reduced by 82%. On the ground, ICE units were now fully exposed. Without city backup, they formed a defensive perimeter 2 blocks wide, illuminated only by flashing amber strobes and the reflection of smoke from earlier fires. The radios crackled with fragmented calls. Perimeter breached, need support. Silence. Copy, holding position. By 21:35, the last CPD cruiser withdrew from the area. From that moment, the federal operation stood alone, encircled not by enemy forces but by a city that no longer recognized its authority. It wasn't a battle. It was the quiet beginning of a constitutional fracture. By 22:45 p.m., Chicago was running on 2 governments, one operating from City Hall, the other from a federal command truck parked behind the Brighton Park ICE facility. Neither answered to the other. In City Hall's basement war room, Governor J.B. Pritzker stood beside Mayor Brandon Johnson, both surrounded by legal advisors, state troopers, and exhausted aides. The screens above them showed live footage from across the city: armored convoys near Pershing, tear gas clouds over 43rd, and protesters marching north on Cicero Avenue. The mayor's voice broke the room's static. "We are declaring Chicago a no-ICE zone effective immediately. Federal agents are trespassing on city property." At 22:52, the governor signed Executive Directive 14B, formally rejecting all federal enforcement actions within Illinois borders. Within 8 minutes, the Department of Homeland Security filed a counter-brief, citing active insurrection and obstruction of federal authority. 3 lawsuits hit the Northern District Court before midnight, 2 from the federal government, 1 from the state of Illinois. Each demanded jurisdiction over the same square mile of land. Cable networks split their screens into 2 halves. Left footage of federal convoys securing intersections. Right live shots of the governor's press conference. A chyron read, Chicago, federal occupation or constitutional defense. Meanwhile, across downtown, the financial cost began to surface. Infrastructure sensors recorded $47.8 million in property damage. Emergency services logged 1,242 calls in under 3 hours. Half went unanswered due to overlapping command protocols. By 2310, radio frequencies between CPD and DHS were fully separated: 2 systems, 2 command chains, 2 realities. And for the first time in modern American history, a major U.S. city had formally refused federal command while federal forces were still inside its borders. The result wasn't victory or surrender. It was something far more dangerous: a government divided in real time. By 23:30 p.m., communication between Chicago's local command and federal forces had completely severed. What remained of coordination now existed only through aerial footage: police drones orbiting a city divided into colored zones. Blue for local, red for federal, gray for chaos. None overlapped cleanly. Inside the Brighton Park perimeter, ICE units huddled behind armored vehicles, operating on backup generators after the local grid failed. Over 1,200 civilians surrounded the area, their chants echoing through the night. Fragments of protest, anger, disbelief. Helicopters hovered low, rotor wash scattering embers from burning barricades into nearby streets. By 2342, the National Weather Service reported smoke plumes visible 18 miles east, drifting over Lake Michigan, an image replayed on national television with the caption, "Chicago in standoff." City dispatch logs later confirmed 247 separate fires, 62 arrests, and 19 injuries. Within a 3-mile radius, the highest single-night record in Chicago since 1968. Emergency calls overwhelmed the 911 system. Operators rerouted nearly 40% of them to voicemail queues that never cleared. At 23:58, the Federal Command Center transmitted its final encrypted update before the blackout. Containment holding. Civilian presence decreasing. No coordination with city units. But the sensors told another story. Thermal cameras detected growing movement from the north and east. Crowds still gathering, refusing to disperse. At 0:15 a.m., the lights of Brighton Park flickered once, then died completely. The last drone feed froze on a single frame. The American flag at the ice gate, tilted sideways in the wind, covered in soot but still hanging. By dawn, the statistics would dominate headlines: $132 million in damage, 14 government investigations, 0 confirmed leadership accountability. But behind the numbers, one truth remained. That night, the laws didn't fail. The trust holding them together did. By sunrise, Chicago stood in uneasy silence. Federal vehicles idled behind fences, still streaked with ash. And the streets that once pulsed with anger were littered only with torn flags and melted plastic. The government called it an operational success. Locals called it a warning. In 48 hours, the city had gone from debate to division, proving that order isn't kept by power, but by trust. And when that trust breaks, even the most organized nation can fracture from the inside out. What happened in Brighton Park wasn't just a standoff, it was a mirror reflecting how fragile the idea of unity truly is. If you were watching that sunrise, would you see recovery, or just the calm before the next collapse? Comment your thoughts below, and don't forget to subscribe for the next chapter. Because this story isn't over yet.